Welcome to Discover E's Persist series, where we create conversation to help women thrive and persevere in engineering and tech careers. On today's episode, we'll take a look at how institutions from higher education to corporate businesses can offer young professionals the support needed in order for them to feel a sense of belonging and to set them up for success in the long term. How can we ensure that degrees actually do open doors and that they amount to life-changing opportunities? What systems or structures can be implemented to advance young professionals who have been marginalized or have had limited access to training programs and pursuing their degrees? And how can higher education, workforce development initiatives, and institutions work together towards implementing transformative change? We'll take a look at all of these questions and more on today's episode. So stay tuned. I can't wait for you to meet today's speaker, Reyes. With over 25 years of experience in higher education, ranging from students and academic affairs to institutional development, Maria is currently the Dean of Industry and Public Service at Phoenix College. In addition to overseeing a $2.4 million project to increase student STEM retention at Hispanic-serving institutions, Maria also works with middle and high school students to increase the number of Latinas pursuing engineering. Joining Maria today is the inspiring Gabriela Gonzalez, a deputy director at Intel Corporation. She's also become Intel's go-to person for anything that has to do with promoting STEM for women. Gabriela is all about listening and localizing in order to change the narrative for the next generation of STEM innovators. I'm thrilled to introduce you to our speakers.
Hi, my name's Maria Reyes. I'm currently serving as the Dean of Industry and Public Service for Phoenix College in Phoenix, Arizona. My journey in STEM started when I was an engineering student at Arizona State University. I received 2 degrees in civil engineering from Arizona State, a bachelor's and a master's degree, and eventually decided to take a turn into higher education and now serve as an administrator for programs like engineering, as well as I do teach engineering at the community college. I worked at Arizona State University while I was getting my master's degree in civil engineering and eventually came over to community colleges to serve students that I really wanted to outreach to and work with at the community college. I eventually went to Harvard and at the Kennedy School received a master's in public administration, really trying to bring together both a technical and a policy aspect to the public policy work that I do in higher education. I stay very connected to my technical work by collaborations and partnerships with industry members. You're going to meet one of my co-collaborators really soon, and what some of the work that we do to outreach to Latinas and to diversify the workforce, get more young women and especially Latinas into STEM careers, especially engineering. I'm really focused on young women and women getting involved in engineering and participating in the problem solutions or the solutions to the problems that we're trying to design and engineer and build for our communities and for anything that needs to be done. And I want more women to be involved in those aspects. Studying engineering, I didn't see many other women in my classes, nor other Latinas. And so that was really a jarring experience for me. And what I found was that imposter syndrome was always there. Like, should I be here? What am I doing here? Why am I here? And what do I have to offer? And so I think that from the very beginning of my career in higher ed as a student, I started to experience that. And then as a professional, young professional, and then as a working professional as well, I had to find out how to navigate through what my own thoughts were and understand that I had something to contribute because I bring a diverse voice, and because there weren't many women and then there weren't many Latinas. What was that unique perspective that I could bring to a problem we were solving, or to an educational issue we were addressing? In academia, when I'm at the table, sometimes I have to recognize that I am, in some cases, the only person of color, or in some cases, the only woman. There's still a lot of male influence in especially some of the programs that I work in. Take a deep breath and recognize that if my voice is not there, then there's no voice at all for women or for Latinas. I remember my first day in Harvard, the dean said, and I don't know what my colleagues were feeling, but I was very much so feeling like, I don't know if this is my place. And I was a returning student. I had 3 kids, I was married, I wasn't a 17 or 18-year-old student. And the dean said, if you're wondering if you should be here or not, we don't make mistakes. We invited you, we accepted you, and you're here because we wanted you here. I want every student to feel that way at any institution. You are here because you're supposed to be here, and this is the place for you. And whatever leadership step it took for you to breach those doors, we want to welcome you. This is where you're supposed to be and what you're supposed to be doing. And so I try and work with students. That's what I really try to provide them every day.
Hi, my name is Gabriela Gonzalez, and I'm Deputy Director of the Intel Foundation. I also work for Intel. I have a bachelor's in electrical engineering, a master's in manufacturing engineering, and I recently just received my PhD this year in social science. I did engineering for about 20 or so years of my career. I started at Xerox Corporation, did manufacturing engineering there, and then I relocated to LA, worked for Xerox there a little more, and then decided to join Intel in 2000 as a engineer for the factories where all of the microprocessors are manufactured. I stayed with manufacturing for another 12 years. And then I started to ask questions about where were all the women? I was one of the few women in our manufacturing facilities. And when you're in manufacturing, you're so busy doing the work of putting out the product that you often don't have time to look outside the world and see what's happening. So I started doing some research and asking some questions and starting to look at the data as all good engineers do. And I realized after looking at the data that as a nation, we had not made any progress with respect to young women graduating with engineering degrees. And in fact, for computer science, we actually got worse. And none of the answers seemed to satisfy my need for facts and knowledge and reasons specifically why women were still not included or well represented in technology, engineering, computer science. So I decided at that point to have a mid-career change, and I went back to school to look for answers to those questions. And during that time, as I was doing school, I was pinged by people at Intel to join their corporate affairs group at the time to really dive deeper into the pre-college area of STEM, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, and try to figure out what was keeping young people, particularly people of color, from pursuing these careers and education paths. And so that's what got me to my current position in the foundation. When I was in high school, I was never exposed to any type of opportunities to think about engineering or science as an educational path. As a matter of fact, I was not encouraged, and in some cases somewhat discouraged from even going to college. And I think that was due to a lot of bias in the school that I was attending at the time, and people not quite understanding my abilities. And so, I had teachers and counselors tell me, don't worry about college. You're going to get married anyway and have children and raise a family. So there's really no need for you to think about college or prepare for college for that matter. That was a really insightful moment. I was barely 17, 18 years old. And I really started questioning myself and my ability to pursue college. I think their primary reason for wanting me to just not consider college, quite honestly, is because I didn't have the financial means to go to college. My family was on the welfare system. I worked almost 40 hours after school every week to just sustain the family and myself. And so I hadn't given a lot of thought about how I was going to pay for college, but I want to assign some positive intent to the folks that maybe didn't think I had either the capability or the means to go to college. In retrospect, there was one person in my church group, my youth leader in church, who just happened to have graduated with a mechanical engineering degree from the University of Washington. And he's the one who really asked me, what are you doing after high school? And I said, well, working to raise money, or I was considering at the time to go into the military as an option. And so he goes, well, let me take you to the University of Washington, which was about 90 miles south of the hometown where I was growing up and going to school. And that was the moment that I met a lady at the school, and she asked me, what do you want to do? And I said, I don't know. And she said, what about engineering? And I didn't know what engineering was, to be quite honest. And she said, we have scholarships for women who want to pursue engineering. And at that time, I just said, sign me up. I don't care what engineering is. I can learn about engineering later, but if that's going to get my foot into college, I'm all in.
So Gabriela and I both were members of the Society of Hispanic Professional Engineers, and as women in engineering, I think we saw the need for support, and SHIP, SHPE is where we found it, at UW and me at ASU. And I knew of you when I was a student, I think, or when we were back in that day. And
yes, because we used to attend the national conferences,
yes.
So I'm sure we ran into each other without really knowing. Yeah, so it was fated to happen.
So we're two women that were leaders in SHIP and eventually found each other with this matched mission of how could we diversify the technical workforce? How could we impact the number of women that are going into engineering specifically, but also STEM? We iterated our design, I remember, but also the name. We intentionally named our program Hermanas, really as a call to our sisters, and it was a call to action. Diseña tu futuro. And it was come and design your own future.
Yes, and I also recall we were intentional about figuring out how to make this sustainable and scalable. And even though we started kind of as an experiment to see how this would work out, the girls really took to it. They really enjoyed the engagement model. One of the drivers of kicking off this conversation was that we both agreed basically that the programs out there weren't really having the impact at scale that we needed to see in order to diversify that workforce. And we started to analyze that and why that was happening, which was one of the questions that I needed to answer for myself. And I think through conversation, we identified some elements that led us to that model of engagement. And it basically became three-pronged, which was the educational fair, which provide resources for the girls, the town hall, which
the role models,
so Maria mentioned. And it was just not about the role models. It had to be role models that the girls could connect to and relate to.
Right.
So they had to be role models who had a similar story to the girls we were trying to reach.
Correct.
And the third part of it was the actual skills building and trying out hands-on engineering, science, math, without that fear of failing, right? It was okay for them to discover and explore in a very safe environment. And the overall arching theme of it was too, we were intentional about working with middle schools and high schools and attracting the girls that would never otherwise consider this path of engineering, science, math, or even consider those careers.
And we, like two good engineers, sat down at her dining room table and engineered and designed what we thought would be the most impactful engagement for these young women. And that's where these three elements came. This is putting your future in your hands. We're giving you resources, we're giving you experiences, and we really intentionally focused on how we could hand social capital and educational capital and other resources to these young women, young girls, and help them design their future in STEM.
Again, because most of the time these girls were discarded, and like me, when I was in high school, and probably you too, told that this wasn't a place for us, engineering and computer science. So the girls really took to it. And I think what was one of the data points that got me to think that this was working, not only was it the feedback from the girls and the data that we collected over the years, we put together a handbook and we're able to copy this program to other parts of the country. So in Oregon, they're also doing Hermanas, and they've been doing it for, at least the last 12 years or so. They started shortly after Arizona. Within Arizona, we started with one community college, and we've expanded to at least 3. And also, we scaled it to Guadalajara in Mexico.
Right.
And oddly enough, in Guadalajara, they call it Sisters in STEM. So they use the English version. But yes, it's been sustained over the years.
So really that whole familial aspect of what we created, we brought other women with us along the way, men and women who've participated, but it's always been this family feel of comadres and hermanas working together to provide these opportunities for the young women that we hope to see in engineering someday.
Yeah, and actually, to add to that, again, another reason how we know this is working is because some of the girls started creating their own Hermanas clubs.
That's right.
Back at their schools.
That's right.
Just out of their own determination to continue to gain that support and to network with each other so they could support each other through their journey. And the other thing that was sort of added more recently is that connection with ASU and making sure that there's a pathway from community college to college. And we have support at ASU. They brought role models into the town hall, and also now they're making a more intentional effort to track those girls who go through the Hermanas programs and then eventually end up at Arizona State University, ASU, in one of their engineering programs. We have several of those as well.
One of our real intentional aspects is the social capital and the networking capital, and I feel that's one of the skills that we intentionally wanted to bring to these women. We go to conferences and we network and we talk to people, and it brings us resources, and it helps us when we hit those milestones of, oh, I don't know what I want to do, or I need help, or who do I call? And so we intentionally built that into, people here. You can call me, you can call Gabriela, you can call the faculty members that you see at Phoenix College, you can call the advisors that you interact with, and that's one of the skills we want to teach them. Like, here's how we do it, here's how we've networked. We want you to feel like you have those resources as well. We've impacted more than 6,000 young women in this county over 15 years. We've got data points that show before the conference, 35% will say, I know what an engineer does. After the conference, they'll say 91%. Or the one we really love, and it's giving me goosebumps right now, is I can be an engineer or a scientist. And that will change from 50% to 91% pre and post. So at that end of that data is probably 4,000 surveys that we did in the early years. We stopped surveying the girls. We have so much data. And now we're really focused on the longitudinal, which girls are we seeing, or which young women are we seeing in these halls, taking these classes and pursuing these types of careers.
What is really great to see is some of these girls who participated in the program and come back as professionals after they complete their studies to talk to the girls and say, I was where you are. I know what it's like. I've been there before, and now I was able to take what I learned at Hermanas and apply it to my decision making in terms of what choices I made both in high school and in college. And again, we have some success stories from the Hermanas where some of the girls have gone on to college and graduated and are now working as professionals in the field. Our intention was any girl who doesn't see themselves in this space, or any girl who's ever been told you don't belong in this space, those are the girls that we were trying to reach. It's not only for Latino girls, it's really for all girls who want to experience something different and give themselves a chance.
Right. So one of the initiatives that I'm working on here at Phoenix College is to have 100% of our students have an opportunity for a work-based experience before they leave Phoenix College. We've identified 10 different types of work-based experiences, whether it's from job shadowing, internships, apprenticeships, to externships, clinicals, what have you. We've identified them, and I think that's one of the things that can really help individuals develop what it means to be in the world of work. Many of our students here are working already. However, what does it mean to work in STEM fields or in computer science or to be in a clean room? You know, I've been in clean rooms because I know her, and so what does that mean for me to understand that part of the world of work? And so I think those are the types of workforce development opportunities that, especially in a community college, partnered with industry members, that we can provide. And we've taken girls to bunny suited up, right, and gone into the clean room with her. Those experiences help them think, well, I can really see myself doing this.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, to build the persistence, you have to help them understand that it is okay to fail. That failure is not a bad thing necessarily, as long as you learn from it. That self-confidence is huge, and it's okay to fail as long as you learn from those failures and apply them so that you can make better decisions in the future. When I graduated from the University of Washington with an electrical engineering degree, my very first job, supervisor, when he welcomed me into his group, he said, I just want to be transparent with you. I want to be clear. I have, this stereotype mindset of Hispanics, he said, that they don't work very hard and that they're a little bit lazy when it comes to work. And so he goes, so if you have any ideas about, not working hard, this is not the group for you. And I was just taken aback. I was barely, 22 or so at the time, and I had never heard that before. And so, again, I think that was another moment where I had to really think about my answer to that and think about it carefully, since this person was going to be my supervisor. And I simply responded, I understand, and I thanked them. I said, thank you for being honest with me. I said, but I will guarantee you that I will help change your mind about that. And of course, after my rotation in that group for 6 months, right before I rotated out of the group, he told me, you were right. I have a new perspective about Hispanics, and I actually don't want to let you go now. He goes, but he knew I was part of a rotation. And again, that was another really powerful milestone in my career that asserted my ability to succeed despite, stereotypes and biases. And so that's the other pivotal point in my life that helped me to gain that extra confidence that it takes to thrive and survive in a career like engineering.
The advice I would give to my 20-year-old self is to never give up. Persist, persist, persist. I wanted to go to Harvard when I was 17 years old, and I didn't know how to make that happen. I didn't have any idea what it would take to do that. And I went when I was 37, 20 years later. And the other advice that I do give students, and when I teach or when I talk with students, or the hermanas that we interact with, is the hermanitas, is if you don't ask, you don't get. When I was admitted into Harvard, I found out I was pregnant with my third child, and I said, I can't go. They said, no, you can come, no problem. And I said, no, this is something I've been waiting for, this child, that I'm going to wait. And they said, no, why don't we, I said, is it possible for me to come later, a year later? And they said, absolutely. But if I hadn't asked, perhaps I would have given up on that 20-year dream. or turned away from it. So I tell students, you got to ask for what you're looking for and don't give up. There's a quote that Denzel Washington, I've heard him say, is you get knocked down 6 times, get up 7. Right? So it's that next time that you get up, and it's that next time that you do. And that's really the advice I would give to my young self. And I think that I followed was always keep going, just keep pursuing whatever it is that you need to do.
We're about to head to our live Q&A session. So go ahead and find the Q&A button on the toolbar at the bottom of your screen and come ready with your questions. We'll start the session with a few questions of our own. What is the best piece of advice you were given as a young professional? And what institutions or institutional support have aided you to move forward? We look forward to hearing your stories and your responses in the chat box. And we definitely look forward to you joining us for our live Q&A session. See you soon.
That was amazing. I'm almost a little emotional with how much that touched me and my own personal journey and story. So clearly you've both done a great job about reaching young female engineers. My goodness. I think some key things definitely came up about representation, creation of community, imposter syndrome, being underestimated, battling ridiculous stereotypes of blatant racism from your superiors, giving back. I mean, there was so much there. I think thank you so much for everything you both provided in that pre-recorded video. And now we have the opportunity to talk live and interact with our audience. So hi, my name is Vanessa Raquel-Raponi. We met briefly before. I am a product development engineer at a toy company, and I also founded an LGBTQ organization called Engiqueers Canada several years ago, and have been advocating for queer inclusion in engineering, and as myself as a Sri Lankan Italian woman, caring a lot about intersections of diversity as well. But the two of you are both so incredible. We have Dr. Gabriela Gonzalez and Maria Reyes. You both have such incredible stories to share, and thank you both so much for being here today. Would you like to react to your video so far? How did it feel to see that again and hear all of that re-recorded to you?
I guess I'm always struck by how much Gabriela and I have in common, and then how much we have that is different, and I never tire from hearing her story and from telling our story, our collective story. So I think that's what I was thinking about watching it.
Totally.
Yes, and the same for me. It just amazing. Like Maria said, we've been at this for over 15 years. Mm-hmm. And it seems like we just started. I mean, we've had so much learning together. It's incredible, and just watching us retelling how we started, how it all started, and then to see the outcomes and the impact that this approach, to engaging young women has had on the women themselves, mm-hmm. is just really, really rewarding. To know that you've helped to change a life or make a difference in someone's life.
Yeah, of course, especially in someone with following your own footsteps so closely too. All right, well, to start off on the Q&A, we have one question that Andronica asked that I'll just repeat, and then thank you to the folks starting to use the Q&A chat feature. We'll get to those questions too. So our first one is, what is the best piece of advice you were given as a young professional, and what institution or institutional support has aided you to move forward?
And I can put those together, and we both referenced SHIP, Society of Hispanic Professional Engineers, which was the institution I think that was really key and instrumental in making sure I completed engineering, and then eventually 2 degrees in engineering and civil. But I remember my advisor in SHIP telling me when I would introduce myself and say, "Oh, I'm Maria Reyes, and I'm studying civil engineering." And the piece of advice that he gave me was, own it. Don't talk about it as if it was almost like I was putting it, it's a possible I'm going to be an engineer someday, I'm not sure. He said, introduce yourself as, I'm Maria Reyes and I will be a civil engineer. And to really, he said, the number of times you hear yourself say it, it's important to hear yourself say it so that you know it's going to be a reality. And so that has stayed with me. There are things that I'll say in my work or in everyday life and say, I will own it that way, not even sure myself. But but if I hear it and hear it and hear it, I think the most important voice to hear it from first is mine. And that's what he taught me. That was the best advice. I think I was 18 or 19 years old.
Wow, that's amazing. And I think that reinforcement and encouragement with yourself, I know you both had spoken a little bit about self-confidence and that failure is okay throughout your talk. So I think that's very related too. And what about you, Gabriela?
Yes, I'm just thinking back, and as far as institutional support, I agree with Maria. SHIP really helped through college as a network and support system. But I also want to give credit to private industry, to be quite honest. Had it not been for the many internships and scholarships that I received from private industry during my engineering education in college, I don't know if I would have survived, because the internships during the summer, and I had one that actually lasted 6 months, helped me to make, money enough to pay for the majority of my expenses in college. I self-funded my college. So if it had not been for those opportunities to not only, make the money, but also to learn what it's like to be an engineer in the field, it would have been harder to connect what I was learning to the real life of an engineer. And so I think institutionally, I also wanted to give due to private companies and encourage us to continue to hire students even earlier than junior year, because I started before. And then in terms of something that really helped me in my professional career in terms of advice is just speak your voice. And be confident when you do that, because in our culture, we're taught not to speak up, is to be quiet and listen, and not to disrespect others that may know more than we do, especially for women. And in a manufacturing environment that is comprised mostly of males, I remember early in my career manufacturing, I was very intentional, not only when I spoke, because you can't just speak for the sake of speaking, but also be very confident in when you speak and what you speak about. It again, back in those days, and even today, we still see places where, women may speak at a meeting and nobody hears them.
Yeah.
And yet, your male counterpart, your male peer will say the exact same thing that you just said. And everybody thinks it's the greatest thing since sliced bread. And I just want us to, not speak disrespectfully or out of turn, but really make sure that you assert yourself, especially if you're a young professional in meetings. If you don't think that your voice was heard, or if somebody repeats what you just said, is to make the point, and not just stay quiet or just give up like Maria said, is to really say, hey, I also believe that's a great idea, but I said it, 5 minutes ago. So again, especially in engineering, it's really important that you stand your ground, that you speak your voice, and you do it with confidence.
Totally. No, and I think it's very interesting and smart to acknowledge the private industry. And you know, you both were speaking about the work-based experience you're fighting for. I think like I did many co-ops when I was in engineering undergrad, and you know, no one in my family had people had barely gone to university, let alone gone to engineering. So having that firsthand exposure to these different industries was invaluable. And I also relate a lot to the discussion about needing to pay for schooling. Like, you know, I grew up in a community of very wealthy white students in Mass, and I was the odd one out needing to pay for my schooling. So having to rely on scholarships and work and pay for you know, have student loans and all of that was a unique experience within my community, and having the support of those companies was very helpful. So totally agreed with everything you've shared. All right, let's now move to the audience questions. So the first one is kind of a fun pie in the sky concept and taking in your feedback. So the note is the collaboration with community colleges, with both big universities and with industry for STEM related jobs is just such a great idea. And feeling that they're unable to, you know, students feeling they're unable to afford a university degree. What advice do you have regarding starting up a collaboration if it does not already exist more explicitly between the two?
Maria, I'll defer to you. I think you probably have the best insight into the partnership.
I think that our partnership embodies what private industry and public institutions can do together to really provide experiences or opportunities for students. And it takes me back to SHIP as well. You know, one of the things that Gabriela brings is private industry and represents that. SHIP also gave us those connections to private industry and taught me what it was like and taught me how to interact with private industry. So those student organizations, those opportunities where private industry invests. Another institution that I participated in was a leadership institute that was funded by private industry. And those partnerships, first of all, I remember the industry members that supported those. You know, those or supported SHIP. And I look to those industry members. So that's early exposure for those students to those companies. What does it mean? What, you know, what is Intel like? How is that? And so then we're bringing those things to life for students, and the partnerships then are mutually beneficial. Gabriela and I in this would not have gotten as far as we have in 15 or so years without both Intel and our public institution finding some benefit, from what this collaboration brings. And that work-based experience aspect is really about us joining forces together to collectively and have that, we talk about collective impact all the time, right, Gabriela? To have that collective impact on the workforce. The advice I would give individuals, you know, look for the areas where, like you talked about, Vanessa, you talked about intersectionality of different opportunities. Find the partners that are working in those spaces as well, because it's a lot of work. But it's not a lot of work when it's about your mission and your passion. It then becomes work that comes easy to you, right? Totally. So find those partners that have that match mission, and it's okay to say no to the partners that don't, because then it won't be successful. And I think that we're very intentional about that as well too.
Definitely. No, I think that's all very great advice. And I've always found like partnerships and collaborations have always inevitably resulted. I mean, it's fundamentally why we care about diversity. It's multiple perspectives, approaching the same problem from different angles so that we can get better ultimate solutions, right? So that's great. Thank you. The next question says, thank you for the inspiring stories. I'm curious if there are challenges that you faced many years ago, say 10, 15 years ago, that you find you still face today. And if so, how do you move past those? Anybody stuck in the past in your interactions these days?
You know, I think it's hard to think about what stopped me, 10, 50 years ago that I still struggle with today, because I've had 10 to 15 years to learn how to get past some of those struggles. I believe there's still, some bias in the systems, for sure, institutionalized bias, microaggressions, things of that nature, that I sometimes deal with from, again, I'm a small, short, older Latina woman, and I think that stereotype oftentimes does not help me to project, the voice that I want to project. And so I oftentimes have to speak louder, a little bit louder to be heard. And so that's, I think, to be seen, to be heard is one of the challenges that I constantly work on. And I do that through things like this. I try to practice speaking out and speaking my truth. Speaking truth to power is being a challenge as well, because of the hierarchies in the institutions, right? The titles, the bureaucracy. And I'm a very simple person in terms of, I don't care if you wear the CEO hat or, with all due respect, President of the United States. We have a common mission. Let's work together. I sort of try to not think about titles and bureaucracy and just rolling up our sleeves and getting to work. So I think that's one of the struggles I think that I still have, but it takes some practice and acknowledgement, right, that this is a challenge for me to be able to continue to work on it.
Definitely. Well, we're very glad that you are speaking your voice. And Maria, what about you?
I would agree. I think that the institutional structures are something that I still focus on, not just for myself, and I'll talk about what I'm working on with others, but for my students. The data points, the achievement gaps that I see for minoritized students that are still exist today, and for women that in STEM that Gabriela and I are trying to address, is there's institutional structural barriers that continue to exist. I think 10 years ago, I was still working on those. I'm working on those today. And not only for myself as a professional that's trying to promote and do other work in the higher ed institutions, but also how can I remove those barriers for students? And, I had a moment a couple of weeks ago where in strategic planning, we were looking at metrics. Oh, the Hispanic males are not doing well in this area. What are we going to do? And I stepped in and said, what are we going to do to change the institution that allows this to happen?
Smart.
Whereas the deficit,
not
the people. And oh my goodness, I'm talking to an entire institution with president, like Gabriela says, but the moment for the institution to really reflect on who we are and what we do, it was there. And speaking to power and taking those moments are really the times where you take the deep breath and, I'm still fighting this fight, right? For myself as a professional in higher ed, I've been collaborating recently with 3 other PhD, I'm not a PhD, 3 PhDs from universities to talk about what it means to be a female in STEM working in higher ed. And we found a lot of a sisterhood in that work, in writing a paper where we've submitted it for hopefully publication on a model of what are the personal tolls that we experience. And I know, Gabrielle, this extends into private industry as well, but we were focused very much so on higher ed. And what can we provide to each other in terms of support, even telling our stories and sharing our narratives about how we got to the places we are, because we all had different avenues, was helpful to us. And if we provide that opportunity to others in this work, how can we help them as well too? So one of our common themes, I think, here is always about giving back, and especially giving back and helping women.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I think it's very powerful, the talk of the recurring theme about the sisterhood and community. And I think it's, it's difficult to be the person who, I'm the only queer woman of color in basically any space I'm in, let alone in an engineering space. And it's knowing that, you find commonalities with different people to help you feel welcome and comforted, and find those allies and find those people who are going to help you feel like part of it. And even when I become part of the representation, helping other people, follow in my footsteps too. It's a very cyclical thing. And on the topic of sisterhood, someone is curious, how could they start their own Hermanas club at a community college?
We have a handbook.
We do.
Happy to share it.
We do.
Yeah, just contact either Maria or myself through our LinkedIn profiles, and we'll be happy to share the handbook.
Perfect. Yeah, I know with Engiqueers, we had a handbook as well. It's funny how all these organizations function quite similarly at the end of the day. Well, hopefully Rebecca will reach out and follow up with that. Next question is, as a coordinator for internships at a STEM nonprofit, how can I help prepare my students for success in industry? They are getting the education, but how do I prepare them for the more emotional side?
Wow, it's
good question.
Yes, it's really developing a corporate sense of culture. Yeah. Depending on, again, on where they're headed. If they're heading to academia, there's an academic culture. If they're heading to private industry, there's a private industry culture. If they're heading to public spaces like government, there's a government culture. And so I think it's a big, it's a big question that doesn't have one answer, right? It really depends on where the students are headed, but it all boils down to culture and really preparing them for that outside of school culture, that professional culture, whatever that might be. Private industry is slightly different than academia, slightly different than public service. And so I always think the best way to help prepare students is to help them understand that failure is not all negative. However, you need to learn from your failures, fail fast. Yeah. And like Maria said, get up and keep going, right? Yep. Don't repeat the same mistakes. Help them. Communication is such a big thing these days. Written and verbal communication. They need to be able to express their opinions in a constructive way. They need to be able to receive criticism, constructive criticism, and take it in and work on that, right? So I think those social, emotional sort of skills in dealing with people, dealing with hierarchies, bureaucracies, institutions, is how you best help your students be successful outside of the scholarly skills or the technical skills or the academic skills. They need to be able to survive and thrive in the real world. And in the real world, there's a lot of intersections, there's a lot of different freeways, highways, roadways, backways, and networking. Networking is really, really important. So all of those things also need to be part of the overall student experience so that they can better, again, not just survive, but really thrive once they graduate or once they move on to a profession.
100% agreed. It actually reminded me, I'll drop this in the chat. A colleague of mine named Gorik Ng wrote a book on this exact topic called The Unspoken Rules, Secrets to Starting Your Career Off Right. And he came from a family where, he had to work part-time to help support his mom. And he ended up making it to Harvard and compiled all this, insightful information about things that aren't taught, those like je ne sais quois of industry. So I'd encourage people to check that out because I think it's very important. So our next question is going to touch you, but someone is curious what messaging you would have to young people who feel that they can't achieve the goals that they've set out for themselves. So I think somebody said they went to Harvard several years after they had a goal. Maybe, Maria, do you have any advice on that?
Yeah, the never give up aspect is, I think what I did over those 20 years was put, and I'm going to pick up on Gabriela left off, which we finish each other's sentences anyway, is the networking. Is,
Yes.
I think I was gathering, I know I was gathering people all along the way that would help in one aspect or another. And I always had people or colleagues or friends or mentors or formal mentors that I could call and say, I'm having problems with this. And it was different people, if there was, the problem was focused on what does it mean to be a working mother, I had a different person I would call. Or if it was, I need to know how to navigate this hierarchical aspect, it was someone else. And so I was always gathering people and bringing people to me that could help me eventually get to that goal.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe not knowing that's what I was doing, but eventually when it came time to apply for Harvard, I looked around and said, I need this person's help to do this. I need this person's help to do that. And I'm going to network through this. And here's what it's going to take to do this. And when I sat down to apply, I remember I said to myself, it's not a matter of if I get in, it's when I get in. And it was that own it aspect. And I got in the first time I applied because that was the mindset. But there were people that were helping me put all of that into play. So 20 years later, so it might not be that I can do it tomorrow, but I can start to put the pieces and the people and the networking. And that's why Hermanas is so important to me. And I know to Gabriela as well, especially the students, we're reaching out to students that have not been exposed to these opportunities. Yeah. We're not seeking the ones that have, know what an engineer is. And we're seeking individuals who've never been exposed to what this opportunity could be. Because if we can provide a piece of the puzzle, a next piece of the puzzle, or the person or the network, or even if they feel they could call me at any time, that's what we want to hand to these young women from everywhere. We want them to have that social capital and those networks that will help them reach those goals even when they think they can't. One of the things also in work-based experiences I'm trying to do is put out small short videos of my students and our students doing these, the student in the clinical experience, or the student on the fire serving as a paramedic intern on the fire truck. And if you can see it, perhaps that will bring it to life for you. And we talked in the video about getting into the clean room, or seeing someone dressed ready for a clean room, or things like that, and to be in manufacturing. So those opportunities I think are important too.
100%. No, and I think I would definitely reiterate it's not if but when concept, because a goal is a goal is a goal, right? Like it can be long term, it can be short term. Ideally, it'll have a timeline associated with it, but just because it might not happen or might not be feasible in the short run doesn't mean you need to get rid of it. Gabriela, do you have anything to add about this concept?
Yeah, I think both Maria and I, again, we have had different challenges throughout our lives, but everybody's situation is unique and personal to them. My latest saying is find the yes to the no. And I'll just share a brief anecdote from when I applied for my PhD. I remember the director of the program at the time, call me to a meeting, and this was right after my father passed away, by the way, which had me in this emotional roller coaster. Excuse me. And he sat me, across from his desk, and he said, "Hey, we received the application. The selection committee is looking at it, and there's a very big possibility that it won't be accepted because not that many people think that what you are wanting to research is important enough." and of course it was about girls in STEM, especially girls of color. And so again, that kind of helps you to think about some of the institutional bias. Well, the selection committee didn't think that my research was important enough. And so he asked me, he goes, well, what would you do, if you don't get into the program? I said, I'll go find somewhere else. I'll find a yes to that no until I get a yes. And I will keep trying, because I'm not going to let one, closed door stop me.
Yeah.
And thankfully, the story changed. And of course, I got into the program and everything. But yeah, it's finding the yes to the no. Like Maria said, persistence pays off. And don't let one, potential door shutting down, keep you from trying to open every door that you possibly can. So that's my advice, because it's for every yes that you get, you may get 100 no's, but that yes is gonna get you to the next door. So
100%. No, I think that's very powerful and inspirational, and all of us should take that away. I'm going to combine these next two questions for our last question, then give you both a quick opportunity to, or maybe within the answer to the question, if you have kind of a closing remark as well. So these last two questions are surrounding experiencing racism and how to respond. So someone said, Dr. Gonzalez, I was astounded that your supervisor had false presumptions that Latinos were lazy. As an African-American young woman, my father had always instilled in me that I have to work 10 times harder than my counterparts because I was African-American and a woman. Were there times that you felt insecure because of being one of few in a white and male-dominated industry? How do you overcome those insecurities, and how do you respond to comments of racism?
Yeah, I think in my younger years, I was a little bit more aggressive and less polished. And as years have taught me better, I know that when confronting racism, open or hidden, I found the best approach, again, is similar to my find the yes to the no approach, is convert that person.
Yeah.
Because oftentimes what I find is not that they're intentionally that way. They were just raised that way. They came to socialize that way. They don't understand. So education really pays dividends when it comes to turning those critics, again, we'll put it that way, into allies. Like my supervisor, I've had many encounters, especially from a gender perspective, in engineering, where I'm stereotyped as a certain type of person, and I always try to prove them wrong through my own record, my actions, not just my words. And so by trying to find common ground, I think has been my biggest lever. Is even when we're in the opposite ends of a belief, or a cultural bias or a situation, I try to first find our common ground and then build from that. Even though we may still at the end have differences in opinion, now we understand and hopefully learn to respect one another for who we are. It's really tough to change people, but I think not giving into that sort of ignorance, or that maybe again through no fault of their own, that socialization, is to help and be an ally to hopefully help resolve the situation, so that at the end that tension is lessened, if not eliminated.
Of course. And thank you so much for everything you've shared. Do you both just want to give a quick closing statement, and then we'll send everyone on their way today?
Yeah, I'll start and then I'll let Maria close us out. So I want to thank you for the opportunity again to share, the sort of the history of Hermanas and in the last 15 years that we worked. Certainly the pandemic put a little bit of a hold to the program, because this particular program doesn't work virtually. It just doesn't. Some things just don't work, and that's okay. But when we are able to reinstate the program, again, we will continue to find ways to inspire and build confidence in the girls. And I hope that we all collectively, as Maria said, continue to do that for the benefit, not just of the girls and their families, but really for the future of our country. We need this talent. It's in our backyards. And if we start to invest more deeply and intentionally in all of these kids that are looking for brighter futures, I think we have the talent we need. We just need to nourish it and invest in it. So with that said, I want to thank you again for the opportunity to share our story. And of course, please, if anyone has any questions, follow up on LinkedIn.
I could not agree more. Thank you so much. And Maria, what about you?
I want to thank you as well too for celebrating Hermanas with us. We in 2020 wanted to celebrate our quinceañera, our 15th year, and we didn't get to do that together, but this has been a great celebration of remembering where we came from and why we did this. And I want to thank the students that go to school every day and persist and continue to take that leadership skill and leadership step to take the next step in their journeys, because that is what inspires me at my work every day. And I take from that, I take that energy, especially the student that is a first generation working and struggling to get through school and really just needs to know that one of us is here for them. We're here for you. And it's our pleasure to really provide any type of support we can. So please do reach out, and thank you again.
Well, thank you so much. You're both incredibly inspirational, and we're so grateful for your time. All right, thank you everybody, and hopefully you will join us next month for the next Persist series. All the best.
Thanks everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.